By the time I stepped through the front door, it was already over. I just didn't know which part of my life had collapsed yet, or why my hands wouldn't stop shaking as I dropped my keys. It was a little after 6. My phone was dead. My jaw was tight from another investor call that ended with polite silence. And the house in Oak Park felt wrong before I even looked up. I expected noise, some rerun murmuring from the TV, the thin clink of a wine glass on the counter, but instead there was only the sound of fabric sliding, deliberate and measured, like someone packing for a future I hadn't been invited into. Lauren stood in the living room with her back to me, folding clothes into a hard-shell suitcase with a precision that didn't belong to an argument or a bad day. She didn't turn around. "Going somewhere?" I asked, keeping my voice level, letting it echo just enough to test whether this was real. The zipper closed in one smooth motion, no hesitation, and that sound landed heavier than it should have. "I want a divorce, Ethan." The words didn't rush. They sat there. I blinked once, then again, waiting for something to catch up. "What?" I said, because my brain needed time it wasn't getting. She finally looked at me, not angry, not wet-eyed, just empty, like she'd already processed the outcome and forgotten to forward me the memo. "Why now?" I asked, the question bumping into the mess of overdue notices and half-finished pitches in my head. "Everything's already falling apart." She crossed her arms, calm as a locked door. "Exactly. I need one thing in my life that isn't." My pulse thudded hard enough to feel in my throat, and I tasted metal. "So this is it," I said. "You pack a bag and leave while I'm drowning." She didn't flinch. "I'm not your lifeguard, Ethan. You bet everything on a tech fantasy and lost." "You're not the man I married." The room seemed to narrow. "The man who paid off your student loans," I said. "Who kept your studio afloat for 3 years?" "That man?" Her jaw tightened just enough to notice. "This isn't about the past." The laugh that slipped out of me was sharp. "It's always about the past." She looked away, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear the same way she used to when she was done arguing. "I believed in your potential," she said. "Now you're just clinging to a dead idea." The sentence landed, then sank. "Is there someone else?" I asked, the air thickening around the words. She froze. Not long enough to confess. Too long to be clean. "No." She said it quickly. I didn't believe her, and the way she avoided my eyes made sure I wouldn't later. I paced the carpet, muffling steps that wanted to sound louder. "Unbelievable," I muttered. "You wait until my accounts are gasping, until one more legal email could finish me, and now you walk." She didn't answer. She just rolled the suitcase toward the door, the wheels clicking like a countdown. "I'm not going to beg," I said, forcing stillness into my shoulders. "If this is who you are, then go." She paused, hand on the knob, and for half a second I thought she might turn around. "I knew you wouldn't," she said, and the door closed with a soft, final click that felt rehearsed. I stood there, surrounded by everything we'd assembled piece by piece, watching it reframe itself as clutter. The quiet had edges. I didn't sit. I didn't shout. I didn't fold in on myself because something else had already started moving under the surface, slow and deliberate. This wasn't just an ending, it was a shift, and the house seemed to feel it too. The silence crawling into corners, settling where she used to be. I didn't turn on the lights. I sank into the battered leather chair by the fireplace, the one she always said made the room feel aggressive, and stared ahead while the street lamp bled in through the blinds and the microwave clock pulsed faint green. After a while I stood, walked into the kitchen, and reached above the fridge for the bottle of small batch bourbon I'd been saving for a win that never came. The cork came free with a quiet pop that sounded obscene in a house this hollow. I didn't bother with a glass. Back in the chair, I took a slow pull. It burned, then faded too quickly. Another, then another. Somewhere around the fourth swallow, a thought began to form. Not fully shaped yet, but solid enough to feel dangerous as it settled in. The fragments wouldn't settle. They kept scraping against each other inside my head. Unfinished thoughts, small humiliations, details I hadn't asked to remember, floating the way dust hangs in a shaft of late light. The company used to feel alive in a dangerous, electric way, like something poised to break atmosphere if I just held the course. Lately, it felt closer to a body refusing to cool, and I was the one pressing my palms down, counting compressions, pretending effort alone could reverse what was already happening. I unlocked my phone and let the screen glow in the dark room. The inbox was a minefield I'd memorized without opening. Proposal declined, strategy shift, final reminder. I flicked them away with my thumb, fast, almost angry. Not tonight. They didn't get tonight. I leaned back and fixed my eyes on the ceiling, on a faint stain I'd meant to repaint, back when plans extended more than a week ahead. Maybe she's right, I said to the empty house, my voice sounding unfamiliar. Maybe that version of me is gone. Something creaked down the hallway. Just wood adjusting to temperature, I told myself, but the timing felt pointed. I exhaled through my nose and reached for the bottle again, not chasing oblivion, just trying to sand down the sharpness. My phone lit up as I picked it up, and there her name was, still anchored at the top like it belonged there. My thumb hovered, muscles betraying me with a slight shake. Then I pulled back, locking the screen before instinct won. I opened my photos instead. A candlelit dinner from her birthday not long ago, a sunburned weekend by a quiet Midwestern lake years back. Then the hospital hallway shot, washed out lights, my face wrecked, her head resting against me like gravity had finally eased. I stopped there. Stayed longer than I should have. When I finally set the phone down, it landed on the table harder than I meant it to. The clock over the fireplace filled the gap immediately. Tick, tick, tick. I'm not calling her, I said under my breath. That's the line. She hadn't stormed out in a moment of chaos. She'd waited. Waited until I was boxed in, exhausted, one notice away from free fall. And then she chose clean hands and an easy exit. I closed my eyes, counted my breaths, kept my jaw locked. What burned wasn't grief. It was the quiet offense of being discarded once I was inconvenient. I'd poured everything forward for years. The small rituals, the constant trade of time for possibility, the nights that ended with apologies instead of sleep. Now I was alone in the house we'd signed for together, drinking the bourbon she used to joke about hiding, resisting the urge to feel like I'd been erased mid-sentence. But I wasn't going under. I poured one last measure, this time into a glass, held it up so the streetlight caught the amber. Still here, I murmured, and drained it before doubt could interrupt. I turned the television on just enough to drown out the clock and let the images pass without meaning, my thoughts already pivoting away from loss toward whatever structure could be rebuilt. By Tuesday morning, rain was still falling, thin, relentless, turning the city into a muted blur. The office lobby was empty when I arrived. No greeting, no packages, just the hum of lights and the damp smell of carpet that had absorbed too many bad weeks. The elevator carried me to the 5th floor, and when the doors opened, my footsteps answered themselves. The space looked smaller. Desks gone, screens dark, the long table stripped bare. Even the whiteboard that once held our future was wiped clean, save for a ghost of marker no one bothered to scrub. At the far end, Mark sat hunched over a mug, sleeves pushed up, wearing the same faded hoodie he defaulted to when margins tightened. He didn't look up until I stopped beside him. She left, I said, keeping it plain. His head lifted slowly, eyes narrowed. Left? I nodded. Packed. Divorce. He leaned forward, rubbing the back of his neck, bracing himself like whatever came next would land hard, and it was already on its way. He let out a breath first, like he was testing whether the room could hold what he was about to say. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That's brutal. He hesitated, then added, I really thought you two were solid. So did I replied, the words coming out flatter than I expected. Silence stretched between us, the kind that isn't empty but crowded, where thoughts you don't want start arranging themselves anyway. The rain against the windows kept tapping in uneven bursts like it was counting down to something. Finally, Jason set his coffee mug down with both hands, squared it carefully, then looked straight at me. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he said. My stomach tightened before he even finished the sentence. He glanced toward the window, then back. "I'm stepping away from the company." I blinked, once. "You're what?" "I want to cash out my equity," he said. "I've been thinking about it for months. The slowdown, the funding drought, the delays. It's time." For a second, the words didn't connect. They just floated there. Outside, rain streaked down the glass in thin lines that looked like cracks spreading. "You're serious," I said. He nodded. "I already have an offer. Product lead at a fintech firm downtown. Bigger team, stable runway. They move fast." He paused. "It's a lifeboat." I cut a short laugh that didn't reach anywhere useful. "That's exactly what it is." He didn't argue. I turned toward the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. The city below looked washed out, edges blurred like a photo left in the rain too long. "I've had your back," he said from behind me. "You know that. We built this together. But it's not working anymore. The market shifted. We missed the timing. I can't go down with it just because I helped build it." I watched a yellow cab slide through the intersection, its reflection smearing across a puddle like wet paint. "You told me we were partners," I said quietly. "Through everything. You said that when we signed the first lease." "I meant it," he replied. "But this isn't personal." I turned around then, looked at him fully. "That's the problem," I said. "It should be." He looked away. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue. People leave. Sometimes loudly, sometimes politely. Sometimes they convince themselves it's mercy. "I'll have the paperwork drafted," he said, standing. "You'll take my shares. I just want out clean." He slipped on his jacket, paused at the door. "Take care of yourself, man." And then he was gone, leaving the room quieter than before. I sat back down and stared out the window again. First Lauren, then Jason. And me, still here, surrounded by hollow space that echoed no matter where I stood. The morning of the hearing, it was raining again. Not dramatic rain, just enough to weigh the air down, to make shoulders curl forward like even the sky was avoiding eye contact. The courthouse smelled of stone and disinfectant, security scanners humming softly as people shuffled through. I wore the only suit that still fit. Charcoal, pressed, looser than it used to be. I caught my reflection in the security glass and barely recognized how sharp my face had become. She was already inside the courtroom when I walked in. Calm, prepared. Hair pulled back, a tailored coat that probably cost more than my checking account balance. Her attorney sat beside her, flipping pages with the confidence of someone billing by the hour. She didn't look at me right away. I took my seat next to my own lawyer, a quiet man named Reynolds, who communicated mostly through pauses and raised eyebrows. "All rise," someone said. We stood, sat. The case was called. Her lawyer spoke first, voice smooth enough to sound compassionate. "Your Honor, Mrs. Carter is entitled to half of all marital assets, including equity in Mr. Carter's company, regardless of current valuation. That business was built during the marriage. She is seeking only what the law provides." I kept my eyes forward. Reynolds leaned toward me. "They're going aggressive." "I know," I murmured. "Let them." The judge turned to our side. "Mr. Carter," he said, "your response?" I stood, feeling every pair of eyes settle in, knowing whatever I said next would change everything. And there was no stepping back once it started. My voice stayed steady when I spoke, which surprised even me. "Your Honor, I'm not disputing the divorce," I said. "I'm not here to stretch this into something ugly." The room felt too quiet, every sound amplified. "I'm willing to give Lauren the house, the car too, All I'm asking is to keep the company, whatever's left of it. A pause followed, the kind that sharpens the air. The judge tilted her head, eyes dropping to the file. According to the submitted valuation, she said, the business is operating at a substantial loss. Yes, ma'am, I replied. It's almost nothing now, I understand that. But it's still mine, to rebuild or to let die on my own terms. I turned toward Lauren for the first time. She stared forward, expression sealed, hands folded like she was waiting for weather to pass. I just want to keep the one thing I poured myself into, I said. If she wants everything else, she can have it. Reynolds shifted beside me, caught off guard. Even the judge leaned back slightly, as if recalibrating. Lauren's attorney cleared his throat. My client will accept those terms. The judge nodded once. So noted. I could have sat down then. Instead, I faced Lauren fully, my voice carrying farther than I expected. Thank you, I said, for what we had. I wish it had ended better. Her jaw tightened. Whatever comes next, I mean that, I added. Even if I never understand why you walked away. She looked at me for a brief second. No reply, no nod. That was enough. I turned back. That's all. The judge waited a beat, then said quietly, You're dismissed. I didn't walk out lighter. I didn't feel reinforced. But I felt intact, like something essential hadn't been taken, and that mattered more than relief. 3 days later, everything I owned was folded into the backseat of my car. I wasn't sleeping in it, not yet, but my laptop bag had become a filing cabinet, and I'd memorized which parking spots felt safest. I bounced couches, 2 nights at a friend's place in Aurora, 1 stiff night on the floor of a former coworker's spare room. Pride runs out faster than favors. Then my phone buzzed. Emily Parker. Hey, I heard what happened. If you need somewhere to land, my couch is open. I'm in Naperville now, no pressure. Emily, Lauren's younger sister, quieter at family gatherings, the one who rolled her eyes when Lauren commandeered every story. I remembered a Thanksgiving years ago, a folded note slid across the table. You're the only reason these dinners are survivable. I'd smiled and tucked it into my pocket. Never threw it out. I didn't respond right away. It took nearly an hour to type. Are you sure? She replied almost instantly. Of course. Her apartment sat above a florist on a sleepy block, liquor store on one corner, a dry cleaner with a sun-faded sign on the other. The building was old but cared for. The stairwell was narrow enough that I had to turn sideways with my duffel. She opened the door before I knocked. Hey, she said, stepping aside. You look like someone who's either been through hell or lost a fight with gravity. Little of both, I said. The place was small, 2 rooms, tight kitchen, but warm. Cinnamon in the air, sunlight where it belonged. A couch waited, already dressed with a blanket and pillow. I'm not going to fall apart, I said, setting my bag down, but this feels like oxygen. She smiled, deep and easy. That pillow's yours as long as you need it. Days found a rhythm. I woke early, worked from her kitchen table, pitching the remains of the company into short calls and shorter replies. Most emails vanished unanswered. Some bounced back. I learned how erosion sounds when it's quiet. Emily drifted in and out, pouring coffee, humming while she got ready. She taught art at a nearby elementary school, came home every afternoon smelling like glue and tempera paint. Some nights we ate together. Cheap pasta, stir-fry assembled from leftovers. I offered to pay for groceries the first week. She waved it off. Pay me back when you're rich again. I don't take charity, I said. She met my eyes, gentle but firm. I'm not offering it. This is just what people do. I knew something permanent had already shifted before she answered, because there was no sympathy in her face at all, just recognition, and that scared me more than pity ever could. Days blurred into a week, then another, and one night while she rinsed dishes at the sink and I sat at the small table nursing a beer that had gone warm without me noticing, the words finally forced their way out of my mouth. Emily, I said carefully, like volume alone could crack what we were standing on. I know this isn't your responsibility, and I know how strange this probably looks, you letting your sister's ex crash here. She didn't turn around, didn't rush to reassure me, just kept the water running, which somehow made it harder to stop talking. You're not my sister's ex to me, she said. The faucet clicked off. I frowned, confused by how steady she sounded. Then what am I? She turned, dried her hands on a towel, and leaned back against the counter, studying me like the answer mattered. You're the guy who showed up to every family cookout even when Lauren made excuses not to. The one who helped me haul boxes out of my dorm when everyone else bailed. The one who laughed at my awful jokes and told me my lopsided clay mugs had character. My chest loosened in a way I hadn't felt in months. I'm just saying, she added quietly. You're not here because I feel sorry for you. You're here because I trust you, and because I want you here. The sentence didn't ask for anything, it just landed. That night, stretched out under a slow-spinning ceiling fan, staring at shadows circling the room, something settled deeper than anything the judge had said weeks earlier. This wasn't the bottom. This apartment, the steady kindness, the cinnamon drifting through the hallway, this was a foundation. Maybe the first real one I'd touched in a long time, and the thought didn't scare me the way it should have. By October, the silence had changed. Not the sharp, hollow quiet I used to fight, but a calm that came with early coffee, open windows, and someone humming off-key in the kitchen without caring who heard. I pushed the blanket aside and sat up, realizing I hadn't slept on the couch in months. That shift had happened the way seasons do, slow, almost invisible. My clothes had drawers now. Her spare toothbrush stopped being spare. One night we fell asleep side by side during a movie, and we never reversed course. The company did something I'd stopped expecting. It held. One small contract from a regional logistics firm turned into two, then a handful more. Suddenly I was pitching again without forcing it, feeling something unfamiliar return to my voice. Confidence. That morning I opened my laptop and stared at the numbers until my eyes stung. 6 figures, cleared, real profit. From the kitchen, Emily called out, "Is that the face of someone who doesn't have to live on ramen anymore?" I laughed. That's the face of a man who might finally buy a table that isn't from Facebook Marketplace. That night, I booked a rooftop dinner downtown. Nothing flashy, just string lights, heaters glowing against the crisp air. Emily wore a burgundy sweater dress and those boots she always claimed were a terrible financial decision. We shared flatbread, sipped hot cider, existed easily. Halfway through a sentence, I stopped. She lifted an eyebrow. What? I need to say something. She tilted her head. Okay. I love you, I said. No build-up, no safety net. Not for what you did for me, for who you are. I want whatever this is, with you. She went still, color blooming across her cheeks, then smiled wide enough to hurt. I was wondering when you'd catch up, she whispered. That's when my phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. She nodded toward my pocket. I glanced down. Lauren, we need to talk, now. For a moment, I let it sit. Then, still holding Emily's hand, I typed back, another time. I'm on a date with your sister. Emily raised an eyebrow. Was that? Yep. She grinned. Good. About time she noticed who stayed. I leaned back, heart steady, cider warm in my hands, feeling complete in a way I hadn't known to miss. And before we go any further, tap? Like if this story's got you hooked, because what came next changed everything again. I was standing by the glass wall of the conference room, watching downtown crawl beneath me, cars inching forward, brake lights glowing like tired eyes. When my phone vibrated. A photo. Emily holding up that crooked ceramic mug I'd once called an insult to pottery. Your favorite survived the dishwasher, she'd written. I'm choosing to believe that's a sign. I smiled at the screen, careless, unaware that calm has a way of attracting impact. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. I turned slowly. She stood there like she'd been dragged in by the wind. Hair disheveled, face drained of color, eyes red-rimmed and raw. She didn't knock, didn't ask. She stepped inside like the room belonged to her silence. "Ethan," she said, and her voice cracked before it finished forming. I didn't answer. I walked behind my desk and sat down, deliberately, feeling the chair settle under my weight. Grounded. I gestured to the seat across from me the way I would for a potential client. Not the woman who had packed a suitcase and erased herself from our life without hesitation. She sat, barely, hands trembling in her lap. "I ruined everything," she whispered. "Worse than you think." I waited. The quiet pressed in. She looked up then, really looked at me, and something different surfaced. No calculation, no rehearsed strength. Just fear. The kind that comes when the floor gives way and you realize too late you weren't standing on anything solid. "It was Jason," she said. I didn't react. No shift, no sound. She blinked like she expected resistance. "We were already involved when things started slowing down," she rushed on. "I didn't plan it, it just happened. He kept saying you were buried in the business, obsessed, that you weren't fit to lead it anymore." My jaw tightened, but I stayed still, arms crossed, letting her words stack themselves. She swallowed. "He said if he took control, he could fix it, bring in better clients, clean it all up. I was exhausted, I believed him." She dragged her sleeve across her face. "He didn't fix it. He bled it, took leads, redirected them to another firm he was quietly consulting for. He used me to get access you wouldn't question." Her voice dropped. I didn't know at first, and when I did, I was already too deep. I stood and walked to the window, hands in my pockets, my back to her. Downtown looked distant, unreal. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she said softly, "before it explodes publicly. He's being sued now. It's coming out." "You wanted to get ahead of it," I said at last. My voice surprised even me. Flat. Finished. She nodded barely. "I never meant to destroy you." I turned then, met her eyes. "You didn't," I said. "You just made sure there was nothing left under my feet." Her lip trembled. "I loved you," she said. "I know," I replied. "You just loved yourself more." She inhaled like she might argue. Or beg. I didn't give her space. "There's nothing left to say." She stood slowly, shoulders slumping, older somehow than when she'd walked in. "Emily's good to you," she murmured. "She always saw you clearer than I did." I said nothing. At the door, her hand paused on the handle. "I'm sorry," she said. The click of the latch answered for me. I stood there alone, surrounded by what I'd rebuilt piece by piece, and finally understood the wound I'd been carrying. It wasn't confusion anymore, it was clarity. Colder than grief, but cleaner. I waited 2 days. Let the truth settle. Then I made a call. Harper Reed, an attorney I'd once pitched to who'd declined but complimented my instincts and mocked my inability to bluff. She answered on the first ring. "Didn't expect this," she said. "I need help," I told her. "Not as a founder." She heard it immediately. "Monday?" she said. By Friday, she had a file thick enough to thud when it hit the desk. Jason had siphoned data, clients, even issued duplicate invoices through a shell entity. The paper trail was unmistakable. My ex-wife's confession closed the gaps. Harper flipped through the evidence calmly, the way someone does when they know exactly how this ends. "And who won't be walking away? Are you absolutely sure you want to push this forward?" Harper asked, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the file. "Cases like this don't end quickly. They drain you, publicly." "I've already been drained," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. This part isn't about survival anymore. It's about standing where I didn't before. She studied me for a second, then gave a thin, knowing smile. Then we don't hesitate. We go straight for the spine. The courtroom had a way of flattening sound. Cold lights, polished wood, every cough echoing like a confession. Jason sat across from me in a tailored navy suit that fit a little too well for someone claiming innocence. He kept his eyes fixed just to the left of my face, like looking directly at me might cost him something. When the judge nodded in my direction, I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked forward with a calm I hadn't earned yet. Your Honor, I began. I trusted Jason not only with my company, but with my loyalty. We didn't just share equity, we shared risk. I didn't rush. Let the room breathe. When the pressure hit, when we were supposed to shoulder the weight together, he chose something else. He siphoned what still worked and left me carrying what didn't. I kept my hands still. This wasn't loud betrayal, it was quiet, methodical, designed so I wouldn't notice until the damage was complete. I turned just enough to meet his eyes. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt the people who believed in us, clients who trusted us, employees who stayed longer than they should have. This isn't retaliation, it's accountability. He looked down. The judge disappeared into the documents for what felt like forever. Pages turned, pens tapped, then the gavel came down once, sharp and final. Full damages awarded. 5-year prohibition from founding another firm in the state. Professional licensing suspended. I didn't react. No smile, no release. Outside, I stood on the courthouse steps until my phone buzzed. Emily. Saw the ruling. Proud of you. Dinner's on me. 2 minutes later, another vibration. A former client, then another. Quiet sparks catching one by one. What had burned down wasn't gone. It was fuel. The afternoon she came back was unremarkable. A soft Sunday. Emily was out picking up groceries. I was on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching leaves scatter across the sidewalk like they were late for something. The knock was tentative. I knew who it was before the door opened. Lauren stood there bundled in a long coat, scarf pulled tight, makeup barely holding against whatever was breaking behind her eyes. Please, she said before I could speak. 5 minutes, that's all. I didn't move. She swallowed. Then I'll go. I stepped aside, not out of obligation, but because some doors need to close from the inside. She walked in slowly, taking in the room like it might accuse her. Books stacked on the table, soft jazz drifting from the kitchen speaker. Warm, lived in. She turned back to me. I've been thinking about you, she said. Since your office. Since I finally told you everything. I nodded once and waited. I know I destroyed what we had, she said. I'm not here to rewrite it. I just need you to know I still love you. I looked at her, not with yearning, not with anger, just with distance earned the hard way. She kept going. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was scared. He made it easy to believe it was already over. Tears slid down unchecked. I confessed because I couldn't carry it anymore. Not to get you back, just because it mattered. She took a step closer. But standing here now, I can't ignore it. I want another chance. The silence stretched, long enough for hope to rise, long enough to fall. I'm sorry, I said quietly, and the words were firm without being cruel. That part of my life was finished, I told her, and the word finished landed harder than anything else. She blinked like she'd misheard. I thanked her for finally telling the truth, then added the part she didn't want to hear, that honesty doesn't erase what happens when someone leaves at the exact moment they're needed most. She took a step toward me and stopped. You walked away, I said quietly. Not in a fight, not in a storm. You looked at me while everything was collapsing and chose to go. My voice stayed even. Now I'm standing again. Now there's something visible to point to, and suddenly you want to come back. Her hands shook. I nodded once. You didn't come to rewrite history. You came because you can't live with how it ended. I let the silence stretch. I can. I made peace with it. She folded her arms around herself like the chill had finally reached her bones. I loved you, she whispered. I believe that, I said, but Emily loved me through it. That stopped her. There was no heat in my voice, just fact. I told her how Emily opened her door when I had nowhere to go, how she filled the quiet without trying to fix me, how she stayed when there was nothing left to stand on. Her lip trembled. You're with her, she said. I'm hers, I replied. And I'm happy, really. She exhaled slowly, nodded once, and turned toward the door. Her hand lingered on the knob. I never meant to hurt you like that. I know, I said. But you did. She stepped outside into the cool fall light. I watched her walk down the path, shoulders drawn in, pace unsteady. She didn't look back. Neither did I. When the door closed, the sound wasn't final. It was quiet, settled. The shop wasn't impressive. Wedged between a diner and an aging record store, sign faded, bell on the door too eager. But it felt right. The man behind the counter had silver hair and kind eyes. I told him I wanted something simple, honest. He nodded like that made perfect sense. 10 minutes later, it was done. A thin gold band, one clean stone, nothing trying to shout. It didn't need to. Emily never measured worth by size. She noticed effort, attention, the things people miss. That evening, I came home to roasted garlic and the soft crackle of vinyl. Emily sat curled on the couch with a paperback, hair pulled back. You're late, she said. I held up takeout and a small black box. Ran an errand. She smiled. Please tell me that's from the good place. I set the bag down, took a breath, and dropped to one knee. Her book slid to the floor. Emily, I said, my voice already giving way. You took me in when I had nothing. No certainty, no footing, barely momentum. You didn't rescue me. You stood still while I figured out how to stand again. Her hand flew to her mouth. I opened the box. I want to spend my life beside you. There was one perfect second of silence. Then she laughed and cried at the same time, launching herself at me. Yes, she said, breathless. Yes. I slipped the ring on. She stared at it like it was lit from within. You sure? She asked. I kissed her forehead. I've never been clearer? The garden was small, no spectacle. Just the people who mattered. Leaves stirring overhead, and Emily walking toward me in a simple white dress that moved with the breeze. I stood there steady, finally, knowing exactly where I was meant to be. There was no hesitation when she reached me. No flicker of nerves, no second-guessing in her eyes. She took my hands, and they were warm. Always warm, trembling just enough to remind me this was real. I squeezed back, grounding myself in that contact. The officiant spoke in a calm, practiced tone, words about commitment and presence and patience, but they drifted past me like background noise. I didn't need them. I couldn't look away from her face, from the way her breathing slowed once she realized I wasn't going anywhere. When it was my turn, I felt the folded card in my pocket, the one I'd written and rewritten and ignored it completely. I didn't need a script. I knew exactly what mattered. You loved me when I didn't even recognize myself, I said, my voice steady in a way it had taken years to earn. When everything familiar fell away, you stayed still. You didn't rush me. You didn't try to fix what wasn't broken, just hurt. You believed I could stand again before I did. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look down. She held my gaze like an anchor. I don't care about yesterday, I went on. I don't need to rewrite it or justify it. All I want is every tomorrow that includes you. I felt it then, the quiet certainty that had been missing from my life for so long. She didn't wait for the cue. She leaned in and kissed me, soft, full, unguarded, and the garden dissolved. The applause that followed came from somewhere far away. I registered the sound without absorbing it. There were tears, a few laughs, hands clapping gently, but all of it felt secondary to the weight of her forehead resting briefly against mine, the way her breath hitched and then settled. Later, as dusk folded itself around the evening and the lights strung through the trees began to glow, we stood together, fingers interlaced, watching people we loved talk and move and exist without tension. For the first time, nothing inside me was braced for impact. I looked around at the easy laughter, the unforced smiles, the calm that didn't need defending, and understood something that had taken a long time to arrive. This was the win, not the verdict, not the numbers in an account. This, finding something solid after everything that had tried to hollow me out. I thought about the path that led here without lingering on it. The betrayal, the courtroom, the empty rooms and late nights. All of it had burned down to ash, and somehow, from that, a life had been built with intention instead of urgency. A home defined by presence. A love that didn't need to test itself against loss to feel real. The past stayed where it belonged, behind me, not erased but no longer steering. That could have been the end of it. And maybe, for me, it was. But there's one question that still lingers, one that doesn't have an easy answer. When Lauren finally told the truth, after everything had already collapsed, after the damage was irreversible, do you think that confession mattered? Was it the right thing to do, even if it came too late to change the outcome? Or was it simply a way to ease her own conscience? I'm curious what you think. And if this story stayed with you, if it stirred something or shifted how you see timing and honesty, take a moment to share your thoughts. There are more stories like this, quiet, messy, real, still waiting to be told.